The retirement ceremony had been 3 weeks ago, but for Calvin Mercer, a 9-year-old yellow Labrador with a distinguished K-9 career, it might as well have been yesterday. Calvin had spent 8 years as one of the most decorated narcotics detection dogs in Colorado Springs, partnered with Officer Shun Takamore, a third-generation cop who'd built his entire reputation on their success rate. Together, they'd made over 200 arrests, seized millions in illegal drugs, and become the face of the department's community outreach program. But Calvin's retirement hadn't been voluntary. After a routine vet check revealed early-stage kidney disease, the department forced him into immediate retirement despite Shun's protests. What should have been a smooth transition to a comfortable retirement home became a nightmare when internal politics destroyed everything Calvin and Shun had built together. Lieutenant Victor Raines had been waiting for an opportunity to undermine Shun for years. The two had clashed repeatedly over department policies, with Shun's by-the-book approach constantly interfering with Raines's more flexible interpretation of procedure. When Calvin was forced to retire, Raines saw his chance. He'd pulled strings to ensure Calvin wasn't adopted by Shun as protocol normally allowed. Instead, the dog was assigned to a better placement, a facility run by Raines's brother-in-law, where retired K-9s were supposedly given premium care. The truth was far darker. The facility was a front for a puppy mill operation, using the retired police dog's prestigious bloodlines for breeding while keeping them in conditions that would have shut down any legitimate operation. Calvin, once a respected law enforcement partner, found himself locked in a cramped kennel, underfed, and subjected to brutal treatment designed to make him compliant for breeding purposes. Shun had tried to visit Calvin multiple times, only to be turned away with excuses about quarantine protocols and adjustment periods. When he pushed harder, demanding to see his former partner, Raines pulled rank and threatened disciplinary action. Shun was told explicitly that any further interference would result in his termination. The message was clear: let it go or lose everything. But Calvin hadn't given up. Despite his deteriorating health and the trauma of his new reality, the old police dog retained his training and his intelligence. He'd spent 8 years learning to find things others couldn't see, to track patterns others missed, to never stop searching until he found what he was looking for. Now he needed to use those skills to save himself. The night Calvin escaped, he'd waited until a careless handler left his kennel door improperly latched. He'd squeezed through, navigated past security, and disappeared into the Colorado night. But freedom meant nothing if he couldn't reach the one person who could help him. And with his health failing, with powerful people who wanted him to disappear, and with time running out, Calvin had to do something he'd never done before in his life. He had to beg. The yellow Labrador collapsed on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop, his body hitting concrete with a sound that made 3 people look up from their phones. Nobody moved. The dog's ribcage heaved with each breath. His once golden coat now matted and dull, streaked with dirt and something that might have been blood. His eyes tracked the pedestrians passing by, searching for something specific among the blur of faces. A woman in running gear sidestepped him without breaking stride, earbuds blocking out his weak whine. A businessman in a suit glanced down, frowned, then kept walking while talking into his phone. The dog tried to stand, his front legs trembling, and managed to get halfway up before collapsing again. This time, a young man in a delivery uniform stopped. "Hey, buddy," the delivery driver said, keeping his distance. "You okay?" The dog's tail twitched once. Not a wag, just acknowledgement. His eyes locked onto the driver's face with an intensity that seemed wrong for an animal this close to death. There was something deliberate in that stare, something almost human. The driver pulled out his phone and dialed. "Yeah, animal control? There's a dog down on 5th and Morrison. Looks pretty bad." He looked back at the dog while speaking. "Yellow lab, I think. Old. Really thin. No collar that I can see." The moment the words "animal control" left his mouth, the dog's entire body went rigid. His ears pinned back. His lips pulled back slightly, not in aggression but in something closer to fear. Then he did something that made the delivery driver actually drop his phone. The dog army crawled forward, reached the driver's feet, and pressed his nose against the man's boot. Then he looked up and whined 3 short sounds, deliberate and patterned, like Morse code. That's weird, the driver muttered, picking up his phone. Hold on, I think he's trying to. But the dog was already moving. He turned his attention to a woman exiting the coffee shop. She wore scrubs, a hospital badge clipped to her pocket. The dog pulled himself up and intercepted her path, sitting directly in front of her despite his obvious exhaustion. She stopped, surprised. "Oh my God!" she breathed, immediately kneeling. Her hands moved over the dog's body with professional efficiency, checking his gums, feeling his abdomen, examining his eyes. "You're dehydrated. Severely. How long have you been out here?" The dog leaned into her touch for exactly 3 seconds. Then he pulled away, turned, and looked back at her. Looked down the street. Back at her. The pattern repeated. The woman in scrubs stood slowly. Are you trying to show me something?" The delivery driver ended his call and walked over. "I called animal control. They're sending someone." The dog's reaction was immediate and violent. He barked, one sharp, commanding sound, then grabbed the woman's scrub pants in his teeth and pulled. Not hard enough to tear, just enough to insist. "He doesn't want animal control," the woman said quietly. "And he's definitely trying to take me somewhere." She looked at the delivery driver. "Do you have time to follow? I don't want to go alone. But I think this dog needs help beyond what a vet can give him." 5 minutes later, they were following the yellow lab down a side street, into an area where coffee shops gave way to industrial buildings and empty lots. The dog moved with purpose despite his weakness, stopping occasionally to make sure they were following. His path was specific, deliberate. He turned at certain corners without hesitation, cut through an alley without checking for hazards. This wasn't random wandering. This was navigation. "I'm Celeste, by the way," the woman in scrubs said. "I'm a vet tech at Boulder Memorial." The delivery driver nodded. "Garrett, I deliver medical supplies. This is the weirdest detour I've ever taken." The dog stopped at a chain-link fence surrounding an abandoned warehouse. He pawed at the gate, which swung open. The padlock was cut, hanging uselessly from the chain. Beyond the fence, the warehouse looked like every other condemned building in this part of town. Broken windows, faded paint, warning signs about trespassing. But the dog didn't hesitate. He squeezed through the gate and looked back, waiting. "Okay, this feels like the beginning of a horror movie," Garrett said. "Maybe we should call the actual police?" The dog barked again. Same sharp, commanding tone. Then he disappeared into the warehouse. Celeste pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed. Garrett swore under his breath and did the same. Inside, the warehouse was darker than either expected. Celeste's phone light cut through shadows, revealing empty crates, old machinery, puddles of stagnant water. The smell hit them immediately. Animals, urine, feces, fear concentrated in stale air. Celeste's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, this is a puppy mill." They followed the sounds to a room in the back. What they found made Celeste actually gasp. Dozens of kennels, most occupied. Dogs of every breed and age, all in various states of neglect. Some barked when the light hit them. Others didn't react at all, too broken to care about new humans. The yellow lab led them past all of these to a specific kennel in the corner. Inside was another Labrador, older than the one who'd led them here. His coat was gray around the muzzle, his body emaciated. But his eyes were alert, watching. Around his neck was a faded collar with a metal badge still attached. Celeste moved closer, reading the engraving. K9 Unit, Colorado Springs PD. Badge number 847. Calvin. "Wait!" Garrett said, pulling out his phone and searching. Calvin, Yellow Lab, Colorado Springs. His face went pale. This dog was in the news. Like a lot. He was one of the top narcotics dogs in the state. He retired a few weeks ago. He showed Celeste the screen photos of Calvin in his prime, standing next to a tall Asian officer at award ceremonies, community events, press conferences. The yellow lab who'd led them here pushed past Garrett and pressed himself against Calvin's kennel. The two dogs touched noses through the bars. Calvin's tail moved slightly. The younger dog whined, looked back at the humans, then pawed at the kennel latch. They're related, Celeste said softly. Father and son, maybe? Or brothers? She examined the younger dog more carefully, noticing old scars, the way he moved with trained precision despite his weakness. You were a police dog too. You both were. She reached for the kennel latch. Her hands froze. Wait, if Calvin retired to this place, that means someone in the police department knew about this. Proved it. Maybe even runs it. Garrett's eyes went wide. So if we call the cops, we might be calling the exact people who put them here, Celeste finished. The younger dog barked urgently. Calvin tried to stand inside his kennel and failed, his legs giving out. Time was running out, not just for Calvin, but for all the dogs in this warehouse. Celeste made her decision. We get them out. All of them. Right now. And then what? Garrett asked. We can't take 40 dogs. And whoever runs this place will notice they're gone. Celeste was already opening Calvin's kennel, her vet tech training taking over as she assessed his condition. Critical dehydration. Probable kidney failure. Maybe days left if he didn't get treatment. Then we make enough noise that they can't cover it up. We document everything. Photos, videos, the whole operation. And we get Calvin somewhere safe where we can figure out who betrayed him. The younger dog was already moving to other kennels, pawing at latches. Some he could open. Others required human hands. Celeste and Garrett worked quickly, releasing dog after dog. The animals didn't run. They stayed close, moving as a group, as if they understood they needed to stick together. The younger lab organized them, using barks and body language to keep order. It was remarkable. Military precision from a dog who should have been too weak to walk. They were halfway out of the warehouse when headlights cut through the darkness outside. A vehicle pulled up to the fence. Doors slammed. Voices carried through the empty building. Someone's here. The gates open. Celeste froze, Calvin's weight heavy in her arms. Garrett looked around frantically for another exit. The younger lab pushed forward, positioning himself between the humans and the approaching voices. His body went into a stance Celeste recognized from training videos, ready to defend, ready to attack if necessary. Back door, Garrett whispered, pointing to a fire exit he'd spotted. They moved as quickly as possible, the pack of dogs following in surprising silence. But Calvin was slowing them down, his breathing labored, his body going limp in Celeste's arms. The younger dog kept looking back, whining. They burst through the fire exit into an alley just as the voices entered the warehouse behind them. Shouts erupted immediately. The dogs are gone. All of them. Celeste, Garrett, and 40 dogs ran. 2 blocks away, Celeste's legs were burning. Calvin was dead weight now, barely breathing. The younger lab suddenly changed direction, leading them toward a residential area. He stopped at a house with a pickup truck in the driveway, barked 3 times at the front door, then sat, waiting. What are you doing? Garrett hissed. We can't just... The front door opened. A man in his 30s stepped out, confused. What the hell? Then his eyes landed on the younger lab. His face went completely white. Shun! The dog barked once. The man, who had the same features as the officer in the photos Garrett had seen, stumbled down his porch steps. Shun? Oh my God. Where have you been? I've been searching for 3 weeks. They told me you were placed somewhere safe. They wouldn't let me see you. He stopped talking when he saw what Celeste was carrying. Calvin. The name came out broken. Shun Takamore, because this had to be Calvin's former handler, dropped to his knees. The younger lab, apparently also named Shun after his handler, pressed against the officer's side. Calvin's eyes opened at the sound of his former partner's voice. His tail moved, just slightly. "What happened to him?" Shun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Celeste explained quickly: the warehouse, the puppy mill, the kennels, the badge number that proved this was Calvin. The younger dog named Shun had somehow found them, led them to Calvin, orchestrated a rescue. The officer's face cycled through shock, rage, and finally cold determination. "Rains," he said quietly. "It was Rains. It had to be. He's the one who approved Calvin's placement. He's the one who threatened me when I tried to visit." He stood abruptly. "Get Calvin into my truck. All the dogs. We're going to Boulder Memorial's emergency vet clinic right now. Then I'm making some calls." "They'll know it was you," Garrett said. "The people at that warehouse saw someone was there. They'll figure it out." Shun looked at Garrett, and his expression was the same trained precision his dog had shown earlier. "Good. I want them to know. I want them to come at me. Because this time I've got witnesses, evidence, and 40 dogs that prove what they've been doing. They buried Calvin once. They're not doing it again." At the emergency clinic, chaos erupted in the controlled way that only well-trained medical professionals could manage. Celeste had called ahead. When they arrived with a truck full of neglected dogs, the entire night staff mobilized. Calvin was rushed into critical care immediately. The other dogs were triaged, documented, photographed. Each examination revealed the same story: systematic neglect, abuse, exploitation. Shun made his calls, not to his department, to the FBI, to the state attorney general's office, to every reporter who'd ever covered Calvin's success stories. By dawn, the warehouse was surrounded by federal agents. By noon, Lieutenant Victor Rains was in custody along with 3 other officers and 7 civilians involved in the operation. The puppy mill had been running for 5 years, using retired police dogs as breeding stock while collecting fees from the department for their premium care. Calvin survived the first night, then the second. On the third day, Shun sat beside his hospital crate, the younger lab, his son, DNA tests would later confirm, pressed against his leg. Calvin's eyes were clearer now, his breathing steady. When he saw Shun, his tail wagged. "Not much, but enough." "You're coming home," Shun told him quietly. "Both of you. They can't stop me now. Nobody can." The younger lab, who'd spent 3 weeks searching for help, who'd orchestrated an impossible rescue, who'd never given up on his father, finally relaxed. His job was done. 3 months later, Shun Takamore stood in front of a congressional committee investigating police K-9 retirement programs nationwide. Beside him sat Calvin and the younger Shun, both healthy now, both wearing service vests. The story of their rescue had sparked federal reforms. Rains and his associates were facing decades in prison. And Calvin, who'd spent 8 years serving his community, was finally getting the retirement he deserved. But the real miracle was the younger dog. In the investigation that followed, they'd discovered his story. Calvin's son had been placed with Rains's brother-in-law's facility as a puppy, supposedly for training as a future K9. Instead, he'd been kept in the same conditions as his father, beaten into submission, used for breeding. He should have been broken. He should have given up. Instead, he'd escaped. And he'd done what his father had trained him to do his entire life. He'd tracked. He'd searched. He'd found help. He'd completed the mission. Because that's what police dogs do. They never stop searching until they find what they're looking for. And sometimes, what they're looking for is someone who'll fight for them the same way they've always fought for others. Celeste, who'd been brought in as an expert witness, leaned over to Garrett in the gallery. "You know what the best part is? Young Shun chose us. Out of everyone on that street, He picked a vet tech and a delivery driver who had the time and compassion to follow. He knew exactly what he was doing. Garrett nodded. Think he learned that from his dad? Absolutely. Calvin spent 8 years reading people, finding the ones who were hiding something. His son learned to find the ones who'd help. Same skill, different application. On the stand, Shun was explaining how the younger dog had navigated across 12 miles of unfamiliar territory to reach the neighborhood where his handler lived, then spent days surveilling until he found someone he trusted to follow him back to Calvin. It shouldn't have been possible. The odds were astronomical, but the dog had done it anyway, because at the end of the day, they weren't just police dogs. They were family, and family doesn't give up on each other. Not ever. The committee voted unanimously to implement new oversight for K-9 retirement programs. Every retired police dog would now be tracked through federal databases. Surprise inspections would be mandatory. Officers would be given first right to adopt their partners. The changes would save hundreds of dogs from similar fates. Outside the hearing room, reporters surrounded Shun and his 2 dogs. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. Through it all, Calvin sat calmly beside his handler. The younger Shun pressed against his side. They'd both earned their rest. They'd both earned their peace. A reporter asked Shun what he'd name the younger dog officially, since calling him Young Shun was getting confusing. The officer smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from him in months. Hero. His name is Hero, because that's exactly what he is. Hero's tail wagged. Calvin's head lifted slightly, pride evident even in his weakened state. The 3 of them walked out of the building together, and for the first time in months, nobody tried to stop them. Nobody tried to separate them. They were finally going home. All of them, together, the way it should have been from the start. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.